Welcome to the Inspiring Good podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Community Foundation of Elkhart County, which serves a vibrant community in northern Indiana known for its generosity and strong network of nonprofit organizations. I'm Marshall King, your co-host with Kevin Deary, a veteran nonprofit CEO who now coaches others. Today our guest is Aileac Deegan, who is president and CEO of Ryan's Place. Ryan's Place is a children's grief support center located in Goshen. Aliyak was the first employee at Ryan's Place, and from the onset realized this was more than a job. Ryan's Place has become her life's mission. She moved to the United States with her husband Willie and 4 children in August 1995. Her family had talked about moving to the States and entered the Diversity Lottery, a program for visas to work in the United States. And they won the right to come from Ireland and live and work in the U.S. One of her goals in coming here was to complete her degree in social work, and in 2000 she began her educational journey at Goshen College, and then went on to complete her master's degree at Indiana University South Bend. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me today.
What a privilege to have my friend Aliyak here. She's been around for a long time here, as yeah. I have watched you grow. I have watched you take Ryan's Place from just starting, and you have moved Aliyak, your Ryan's Place mission, into one of the premier organizations.
Thank you, Kevin.
And you're just wrapping up a capital campaign, which we're really excited about.
Very excited, yeah.
And I'm very excited for you.
Yeah.
But before we jump into Ryan's Place, I want to talk a little bit more. Knowing I'm an Irish American, I love your brogue.
Oh, thanks, Kevin.
Let's start with Ireland and how you got here.
Sure. Willie, my husband, and myself had, we had thought about moving quite a bit. I was the one really that wanted to move. And the opportunity came up with this diversity lottery, and quite a number of Irish people were getting them at the time. And there's 50,000 of them given out worldwide, and we got one of them, and then turned into 6 because there was 6 of us. And so we came here, we were able to start work right away, and we bought a house by fax because there was no internet back in those days. So we bought a house that we're still live in on 8th Street in Goshen, and we're just settled in and assimilated into the community, as did our children, and they took part in lots of different, sports and different things, and 3 of them still live and work in the community. And so it's been wonderful. Our grandchildren are Irish, American, and Kenyan. There's a kind of an international mixture there. So,
and truth be told, our children grew up together.
They did,
Played sports together. We watched them play soccer, play baseball, play football, run track. Yeah. We have been good friends watching our children grow, and have been so blessed to be part of this community.
Yeah.
And then we both followed the same education track, both going to Goshen College, both getting our degrees, moving on later to get our masters, and then to give back into the community. And let's talk a little bit of how you ended up at Ryan's Place.
So after I moved here, I got a part-time job working for a computer company, and then I heard about a job at Campfire USA, which used to be Campfire Boys and Girls, and they it was this program director, and I had worked a lot in Ireland. I had helped start multi-denominational co-ed schools, because all of the schools in Ireland are religious based and tend to be single sex. Now that has changed since we left in 95, but I with a friend of mine who's from this area, how we ended up here, the Linda Lichty, the 2 of us got involved in this school. So I used my experience from there, applied for a job at Campfire, and so I was there for about 9 years, and I wanted to go and finish my degree, and I had started it at that stage, and I needed to work part-time. So I left Campfire, and then almost immediately the opportunity came up for Ryan's Place. And I will be perfectly honest with you, I didn't think a lot of it about, the mission at the time. I'd had a lot of different grief experiences in my life, so it appealed to me, but I didn't even know what I was getting into in terms of the mission and what it meant. And so that became apparent right away. And I've just loved being there. I've loved going to work every day.
And there were founders that came together through their own grief process.
Yes.
And why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Rex and Nancy Gleim, son Ryan was killed in a car accident, and they took their grief and they were looking for something for themselves and for their surviving son in terms of, help out there. And they found a counsellor, a therapist who they worked with, but their son it didn't fit for him at all. And so that couple who were their therapists and themselves just started looking around to see if there's anything for him, and there really wasn't a lot. And so the idea, it was a seed that started, and they eventually got in contact with other children's grief support centres around the United States and decided to open one in Elkhart County, which was great. There's a similar organisation in Fort Wayne that had been established before ours.
So you had to hire staff and volunteers, make sure they were very carefully trained in grief counseling.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So Ryan's Place had been in operation 3 years before I started. It was purely volunteer-led. They didn't have any paid employees. And so when I moved into the position, they had already been through training, Rex and Nancy, through training out in Portland, Oregon at another centre. So they kind of knew how to do the training with the volunteers. So kind of I took that, and then I went to Portland and went through the same training and learned an awful lot. So, what we do is if somebody is interested, we look for volunteers and we, talk with them carefully and see what their strengths are and whether this would be a good fit for them, because grief is hard for people. We've had people that start and they actually realize that they have some unresolved grief issues and they can't continue until they get help themselves.
So tell us specifically the mission then. I mean, you've described it a little bit.
Yeah.
And who are you serving and how many a year?
Sure. So the mission of Ryan's Place is to provide support in a safe environment for children, teens and their families who are moving through the grief process. And so over the years, since they opened in 2002, we've served over 19,000 individuals mainly in Elkhart County, some in St. Joe, quite a few in Kosciuszko County, and then we have some people come down from the lower counties in Michigan. So we're very volunteer driven, and what we do is that we get we train these volunteers to go through like a kind of pretty rigorous process, and then they're mentored in groups by others, and they don't have to have a degree to do this work. They just have to care enough, and most of them at some stage will have had their own grief experience. So they use that as part of what they do. So we've had some volunteers since I started in 2005, but we also have others that'll start new, and we have a thriving internship program where we have social work and counselling students and psychology students who go through the training and do their hours required for their degree at Ryan's Place. So within any given year, we could have 12 to 15 students working with us.
One of the things I'm most impressed with Ryan's Place is it's really become regionally known, not just Elkhart County, but around our area. With the school shootings and some of the tragedies that have happened around the country, how quickly our schools turn to Ryan's Place.
Yeah.
Whether a child passes away in any way, or a teacher, or a loved one.
Yeah.
But any place where there is grief, Ryan's Place is seen as the go-to place, working in partnership with mental health facilities like Oaklawn, but really specifically for children and families.
Yeah.
Tell me how can you keep all those borders in place, not just be spread all over the country?
Yeah, sometimes it's difficult because we literally have 5 staff, but with our volunteers and our interns. So I'll give you an example. Just this past weekend, I got a phone call on Sunday night to say that there was a student who died in one of the schools in our community, and they wanted to know, could we have a team of people out there at 7:30 on Monday morning? And so we did. I phone around, and we have a group of people that we've trained for this, and I phone around and we get people that will be there, firstly to talk to the teaching staff, and then the principal, and then we talk to the kids in the classrooms, or we'll make it. A lot of times the schools will make space available for us in the library or something like that, where we can meet with the kids. We bring in very simple things like paper hearts, and the kids get to write a message to the child who died or the teacher who died. And if it's a child, they'll stick it to their locker, and they'll keep all their messages, or they may put them in the desk that the child sits at. And at some stage, they all get to go to the family. All those little paper hearts with loving messages on them get to go to the families, which is really nice,
When you're working with staff and volunteers and they are constantly surrounded by others' grief, how do you check on them to make sure that they're doing okay, that they're moderating themselves and regulating their own buttons and challenges?
Sure. That's part of our self-care piece that we do with our volunteers and staff. And, we'll meet and staff, some issues that have come up during this, or some ways that may have made them feel overwhelmed or uncomfortable. And like, I had someone say to me, please don't send me out any more suicide-related crisis calls. I just can't do it, because they had a family member die by suicide. So we make sure to do that, and to keep, because we want our people to help. We don't want them to be a hindrance in the, when they're going out to a crisis call. But they do so well, and we get asked to come back a lot. Sometimes we'll go in, with one school here in particular, we went in initially for a day and then became two. And then what happened was that our one of our staff and one of our volunteers actually went to the school every week to meet with the staff to help them through what was going on, because they'd had several deaths, one after the other, of students in the school. So, it's difficult, but, I think when they go out, and I used to do them a lot, I don't now. Sometimes I will, but if we're short of people. But the one thing that when you're there, it's just a kind of a relief for the staff and the teachers, the principal, to know that there's someone else that can help them guide with this. And we recently did a training with the social workers at Elkhart schools on grief response and how to do that, so that we have a plan to offer that to all the other school systems around. So,
as a youth development professional for 40 years before I retired, there were very few of these services available. And the overwhelming desire or need for mental health services and grief can get washed into mental health.
Sure.
And there's many different phases of mental health and phases of grief. And to see that it is an organization that really acts as a first responder, like fire, police, medical, they're right there. And how many people who are also professionals, like teachers and principals, also find the gratitude and the need to take a breath. Because before there was Ryan's Place, there were very few of these around the country.
Yeah.
And many of us who worked with children and dealt with grief, many of us were untrained. We were social workers, but we didn't understand the true depths and reach of grief and how it would bubble up later on in life.
Yeah.
Do you keep track of your clients or your families, and tell us how that works?
So, we have a database that we use for keeping track of that way. And then if we have, like, just in the last few weeks, we've had some of our interns and staff call families that would normally come. We have a program for children and adults on a Monday night, and then another night we've got a program for adults only, because they were filling up all the spaces that we needed for the kids. And so but we noticed that, like, some people didn't come back, and so we follow up with them and to make sure everything is okay. Is there something getting in the way of them being there? Is there any way that we can help them? Do they need more individual counselling than they would need group? So we just see where we can offer that and and help them. Sometimes it's because people don't have the gas money to get there. So we, give them a gas card or something.
And you can do this in Spanish as well.
Oh, we do. Yeah, we do. We have one of our staff, Chris, is a native Spanish speaker. So she's doing a lot of the Spanish language groups, particularly with the adults, because their English skills are where they might be okay for everyday things. It's hard for them to express emotion in English, and Spanish is their first language. And then we have others that come that don't have any English. So the children seem to know, they have a command of the English language that they can use, but it's tough for the parents.
You referenced early on that you had experienced some personal loss and that came to this work not really fully understanding it.
Yeah.
What are some of the big things you've learned about grief and loss and how to cope with those that you have kind of become central to how you do this work?
Well, my dad died before I left Ireland. Three of my kids have been born at that stage, and he had been sick for a while, and when he died, he was, it wasn't a shock, but it was devastating for us as a family. But I never honestly thought to get my kids help. It didn't dawn on me that they needed more than us just sitting around talking about it. There might be other things. And my dad died on one of my son's birthdays, and he was upset because his birthday was kind of cancelled, and then felt terrible about it afterwards because he was very, very close to my dad. And he was just so upset about my dad dying. So it was, but I realized I didn't have the tools, or the skills to help them at the time. But it never dawned on me to look for help outside. And the same happened in the early 90s. My brother-in-law, who was 30 at the time, he died by suicide. Sean was his name. And Sean was the kindest, nicest person you could ever meet. And my kids loved him. And he was my husband's brother. And we were all very, very close to him. And we were devastated with his death again. But I didn't think that, what do my kids need? Or what did he had two sons. How could I have helped them? It never dawned on me that that was something that I would do. So when I came to Ryan's place, it made me reflect on the things that I didn't know, and how seeing these children that come to Ryan's place and are getting help, how they do a lot better than, children who don't get any help. So, and I know some families handle it themselves, and it's, that's fine, that's their way to do it, but we're here if they need them.
One of the things I appreciate about Ryan's place, and I know that in my previous career that was such a blessing and an advantage for us, is grief is not just death. Grief, it can be any kind of loss. Yes. It can be addiction of the household. It can be
abandonment,
all sorts of grief. Plus there's different cultures look at grief differently.
Yeah.
How men and women look at grief. I think, it was so pointed when you talked about you didn't know how to help your children.
Yeah.
The loss of their grandfather. Yeah. You didn't even know that you needed to.
Yeah. Or even for myself.
Even for yourself.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about grief is so deep.
Yeah.
And how do you look at not just the death of a person, but also the other things like divorce?
Well, so what we have learned down through the years, there are multiple issues of loss, and we actually do a group at the Juvenile Detention Centre here in Aliyak County, and they meet every other week. And I used to do that group, and I tell you, it was one of my favourite groups I ever did. The kids were so vulnerable, but yet so open in a lot of ways, and they knew they were in a bad situation. But when they would recount their stories, so many of them had multiple issues of loss, and one of their fears was going back to the situation they were in before, because they knew if they went back to wherever they had come from, that they'd end up back in the system again. And that made me realize just how many other things that, kids are dealing with, and where our focus is death of a person. Children bring all sorts of issues to our groups and our the work that we do, and we just make it happen that we can provide that for them. With the JDC group, we don't say they can only be there if a person died, but most of them actually significantly, like probably the highest demographic for children who've had someone who died, whether it was a relative or a friend, or they saw someone being killed, or just a lot of different things. They've suffered, and they then find that, well, maybe they have parents who are incarcerated and they were separated from them, or divorce, or just abandonment issues a lot of times. So yeah, that all comes out in all of our groups.
I've often found working with children, because that was really where I spent my career, was with children, teenagers particularly, when they don't understand how to deal with their grief, and someone cannot help them out of that fog of grief, what ends up happening is the abandonment or the loss of hope. They just don't see any hope.
Yeah.
And what I love about Ryan's Place is the reestablishment of coming through the fog, that it's okay.
Yeah.
And then to see a future for themselves.
Yeah. One of the activities that we do with the kids, we get them they can either do it on their own or with the group. And I think they seem to like to do it with a group. But we give them a big sheet of butcher paper, and they draw grief paths and what their paths looks like, and where kind of the cul-de-sacs are on it, and the stopping blocks, and the things that have helped them, and just different things for them to visualize what their journey has been like through their grief. It's just fascinating to see the kids realize that, that they've come a long way in a lot of ways, since they started working on their grief. And also there are other things that they could be doing, and there are stumbling blocks on the way. And it doesn't mean a year down the road everything is solved, because grief is always with you. You learn to live with it in some ways, but healthily if possible. And you're never going to forget the person who died, and you're going to be sad. Sometimes, I have a sister, I had a nephew die 13 years ago from melanoma, and he was a young father. But my sister often talks about the fact where she thinks, okay, I'm okay. And then she realizes, she hears a song on the radio, or she smells some sort of scent or something like that, and it brings her right back. And it's like it happened that day. And I think the same goes for children. It's not just adults. Children kind of feel these things, but don't even know how to relate that to other children. And so that's the magic of the group. When they're in there together, they're with other children who've been through that same thing.
The use of artwork to communicate grief is so important for children, and also for those who are providing the grief support, because things they can't say, they can color or draw. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, art is so necessary to be available. Like sometimes you'll get like the 12-year-olds who don't want to do it, or particularly the boys, or whatever. But once they start seeing other kids in the group doing, they join in, and they do it too. But it's really, a great visual for them, and even just in making memories. So we'll have children sometimes write a letter to themselves from the person who has died. And it's just looking at it a different way. What would your dad want you to know now that it's 2 years out and you're 2 years older? What do you think your dad would want you to know? And the kids just write the most profound stuff. And oftentimes it will be about stop blaming yourself. And they hear their dad's voice telling them that stop blaming yourself. This was not your fault. Because kids, they take on all the worries of the world. Yeah.
So most of us will not be grief counselors. Most of us will not be experts on grief like you and your team. But we all encounter people who are dealing with loss. I know that there are better things and worse things to say to people in those situations.
Yeah.
Do you have any, it's a little bit off course maybe, but do you have any counsel for us on that? Like what if I'm encountering someone who just lost a loved one? What is something that I can offer them?
So what we would say to people is, you can be practical about it. You can, a lot of people like to share food and that kind of thing and bring it to the house, or a gift certificate or something. But it's really, at the end of the day, it's being kind and just not putting your own personal stance on something. Like I know of someone whose son died by suicide, and some very well-meaning person said to them, I feel really bad for you because now you know your son is in hell. And but they meant it because they really feared that, you know what I mean? But that was very, very difficult for the parents to hear. And that was a long time ago, and they still think about it, you know. And so a lot of times at the adult groups in particular, they'll hear, people will say stuff to them, but also with children. And we think it's so important for children to know the truth, even though sometimes that's hard. And people will often bring their children into us if it's been a suicide or a homicide or something like that, for us to help them, explain to the child. Because if they don't tell them on the outset, the kids are going to find out, but it won't be your story or the proper story. So we would always say, tell them, and we'll help you if you want, or, if you have a pastor that wants to help you or a family member, but just sit with them and talk to them. If it's about a suicide, you can say, some people get sick and their heart doesn't work properly and they die. Some people get sick and their brain isn't working properly, so they do something that affects that and then they die. And it can be a simple language like that. And then as they get older and they understand more, you can develop that. But it is really important for them to know, because time and again, we've seen families where the children are told at the playground or something, and we had one family call us to say, a mother called us, she had to pull into the side of the road and phone us after she'd picked the kids up from school, because somebody in the playground, as they were leaving, said to them, so why did your dad kill himself? And so the mother had to pull on the side of the road and call us and say, what do I tell them? And we said, just bring him in. Just come now, bring the kids in, and we'll sit down and we'll explain it to them, because you want them to know your truth about it. And, not having the kids feel as if they were lied to. Yeah.
As we have moving towards end of our careers, and I know that someday after you build the building and you have brought Ryan's place to the place where it's all time for us to turn it over to somewhere else, retirement looms. And I can tell you there is life after retirement.
I know, I have plans.
But obviously creating a succession plan inside Ryan's place is important. Can you talk a little about how you and the board are addressing that?
So we're actually getting very near. We've got some really good news recently, and we're getting a $1.5 million grant from the Lilly Endowment through, and United Way is who are administering the grant. And so we got a preliminary approval. We have a few ducks that we need to get in a row and get them done, but we're good. And so we hope to break ground this summer. And in that we will be, the building, if that all happens, we will be in the building in the spring. And, people are saying, are you going to retire then? I said, yeah, I'd like to be able to walk the halls for a little while. I want to be able to see what this looks like and see families come in so I'll do that. And then, I will retire. So the board and myself have had endless discussions about this. And Kevin and I had talked to you about it. We need to do some sort of training or something. It doesn't necessarily have to be a training, but something with the board on how to go about succession planning so that we can get the right person to come in, and I can spend a bit of time with them and help them through that time, but I won't hang around. And I've always said, like, when I go, because it's going to be hard to leave. And if I don't do it right, it won't be fair on anybody else that's left behind. So yeah. But our good news is this building's getting built. It's been a long process, but we're getting there.
You've been sharing space with people for a long time.
Yeah, we've been renting space, a lot of space. And, the churches in Goshen have been very good to us. We've been in 3 different churches over the years and giving us space, but it's also shared space where we set up and we tear down. And there's things that we are going to do in this new building that we haven't been able to do. And we're going to hire a couple of child and adolescent therapists that will work one-on-one with kids as well. That'd be the plan. And the one thing I didn't say was there's no cost for our services. We don't charge. So, there's, that little bit of a worry. How are you going to be able to sustain this? So we're going to hire these therapists and do a sliding fee with them, or if people can't pay, they can't pay. I don't even like the thought of that, but we know that funders have wanted to see that because they want to make sure we're not going to build this building and then fall apart. So it's exciting.
Do you want to say any more about your plans after you retire?
So in 26, I am, Willie and myself are hoping to go to Ireland for an extended period of time. And during that time, we just decided the other day, because I heard my niece is doing it this summer, we're going to interrail around Europe and, visit different countries and use Ireland as our base. And just to kind of, because when I go home, it's like, the golden girl is back for a couple of weeks and helping my brother and helping this and helping that, and then I disappear again. So this way, I'll just be part of the thing. I'm willing to for his family, and just having a good time, and are hoping our kids will come over and visit us there for a while. We had always dreamed of ending up buying a place in Ireland so that we could go back to it, but housing is like ridiculous over there, so that won't happen. But we'll make it work.
Well, thank you for all the work you do. You and your family have been a deep gift to this community and continue to be.
Oh, thank you.
You do this hard work and you do it well, but what gives you hope?
So what gives me hope is that I so often see, bump into these children later on, and you can see them, they're doing well in school and even after school. Like, we're around a long time now. So you see these children later. And the one thing that, I say we recruit volunteers, but a lot of places that we get our volunteers from are the adults who've gone through our groups, and we tell them they have to take a gap of a time, and then come back and do the training. And they make the best facilitators. But we've also had kids who are, we've also got now volunteers who are children when they came through, and they're now volunteer as adults. And it just gives you so much, that you've done something right and that you've affected children in a really positive way and their families. And so it gives me hope that, these children are walking around with a lot of complicated issues because they didn't get help. And I'm not saying that every child that comes through Ryan's place goes out afterwards and is this perfect, like, life doesn't work like that. But that we might have been able to help, I know we've helped a lot of children and adults down through the years.
Thank you so much for being here today. This show is a production of the Community Foundation of Elkhart County. It is powered by equipment from Sweetwater and recorded at the Viaggio Studios at We Impact in Elkhart's River District, where there's a bit of construction going on today. Editing is done by the award-winning communication students at Goshen College, home of one of the best college radio stations in the nation. Listen to Globe Radio at 91.1 FM. Learn more about the Community Foundation of Elkhart County at inspiringgood.org. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Music is by Sound Sensations. Thanks for listening. We hope you're inspired and inspire good in your community.